Samuel Pate, David R. Hoffman, Forrest M. Summers, Terry Cook, Daniel Thompson, Albert J. Bauer, Edward R. Ofker, Richard D. Markowski.
Veterans Day dates back to 1918, when an armistice called the end of World War I, and guns fell silent on the 11th hour, the 11th day of the 11th month. An American private described the silence in a letter home. We stood up and didn't say a word. It felt as if we dropped our packs after a long hike, straightened our backs, and we were as twice as light as any bird. But all we did was stand, stare, and stare.
Please accept our appreciation and sincere thanks for being here today to recognize veterans on this Veterans Day. Some of you have come here voluntarily, and some of you have been drafted to come to this assembly. That's similar to the Vietnam Air veterans. It was about 2 years ago, I was up in Rhineland, and I was in an office conducting a little business, and I ran into a guy who was a B-17 bomber pilot in World War II. And when we found out that I was an Army helicopter pilot, we started talking about these flyboy stuff. And he told me a story about how the B-17s, if you know anything about these bombers from World War II, they had a big crew on them. You had a pilot, you had a co-pilot, you had a bombardier, a navigator, you had a belly gunner, you had a top gunner, you had a tail gunner. You had a big crew of people. And the way it worked was the flight engineer and the co-pilot would crank up the aircraft, and the whole flight of aircraft would be ready to take off while the pilots were getting a briefing. They were going to go bomb the Nazis in Europe, and they were going to fly over the channel. And they'd have to get the winds, and they'd have to get what kind of fighter support they were going to have, what kind of fighters they were going to face from the Germans. And they'd get a big briefing, and by the time the briefing was over, all the aircraft would be ready to go. They'd go out on a flight line, they'd climb in the cockpit, and they'd take off to bomb the Nazis. Well, this guy told me a story about how they got a new pilot in their unit, and this guy had been reassigned, and he was kind of a cocky guy, like a lot of pilots tend to be. And the guy gets in the cockpit, and he looks over the flight crew, and there's the co-pilot, and the navigator, and the bombardier, and he reaches into his vest pocket, and he pulls out a .38 caliber pistol. He slaps it down on the console, and he looks at the crew, and he says, you guys know what this is for? They look at him, well, no, sir. I don't. He said, this is for navigators who get us lost. So they crank up and they're getting ready to go. Well, the navigator reaches down in his chart bag, and he pulls out a .45 automatic. He slaps that down on the chart table, and the pilot looks at him and says, well, what's that for? The navigator says, well, sir, I'm going to know we're lost before you do. It's a cute story, and I don't know how true it is, but it really illustrates the fact that in any group of individuals, and I don't care if it's your high school football team or your volleyball team, everybody on the squad, everybody who is part of that crew has a critical job to do.
Informal poll. This is the audience participation. Stand up if you're one of the guys or girls who has signed up for the military, if you're going into the military. Come on, where are you? I know you're here. There you are. If you have a relative, brother, sister, aunt, uncle, who is currently in the military, any relative at all, stand up. If you have a friend or know somebody who has been in the military, stand up.
Lauren Rockhill, Army, 1941 to 1945. Don Shook, Army, 1943 to 1945. Kenneth H. Rude, Rex W. Chapman, Arthur Ondell, Forrest Ashley, Clarence Cluth, Robert W. Lenz, Richard D. Smith, Eleanor Lilly,